you have to be able to recognize when those opportunities are happening and then explain it and using your words and finishing your sentences. Then people can help you. But if you start fountaining over freaking everywhere, nobody's going to be able to help you because they're really just trying to stay out of your splash zone, right? You're tuned in to the Breaking Red podcast, the show for rising military leaders who want to trailblaze the future. We tackle the profession of arms with creative solutions to dynamic issues. This isn't your typical leadership course, so be ready to step up your game and define the future. I am your host, Gabriel Gabe Rockavilla. Let's go. Welcome back, everybody, to Breaking Red podcast. Gabe Rock on the mic once again, and it is November. Can't believe it. It's already November. We had a pretty chill Halloween night last night here in Maryland. We were able to hand out our candy. Gene and I did while Lana and Ben did their trick-or-treating with their respective social circles. They all came back nice, safe, and sound. We took our normal parenting tax of whatever candy that we wanted. Some peanut butter cups, some Butterfingers, some Mounds, the normal parent tax that all parents know that they can obtain from their children after they go trick-or-treating. And we ended up avoiding much of it was crazy windy last night and rainy, and none of that ruined any of the trick-or-treating festivities, so that was nice. But I woke up this morning not really knowing if there was a literal tree going to be going through my car or Gina's car, and luckily none of that happened. I was able to head into Crofton CrossFit, knocked out 20.4 this morning. Felt really good about doing not box step-ups, but doing box step-ups instead of box jumps, and some clean and jerks. So overall, felt good about my score. And been about 2 weeks into my new role as one of the new coaches there at Crofton CrossFit. So very happy about that. I think people are responding well to my coaching style. Just that's what happens, right? It's a breath of fresh air, and I take care and making sure that I provide as much value as possible for the hour that they're under my coaching umbrella, and delivering a good experience that can be applicable to everyone that happens to be in the class assigned to me. So it's been good. Also, now I think it's a little bit over 2 months, maybe 3 months, at least 2 months into my new job, where I'm slowly learning, and my new teammates are learning each other's tendencies and quirks. I think people are used to my very kind of relaxed demeanor that I do. I tend not to get super duper customs and courtesies about some. I don't have lackadaisical customs and courtesies, but I think it's just the Air Force version. Like whenever I'm when I'm talking to a general officer on an email or anything like that, I usually I introduce myself as Gabe Rock, and then I also sign my emails, VR Gabe Rock, and then have my signature block underneath that. And someone else is like, yeah, you probably don't want to do that when you're addressing the colonel, the general, the admiral. I'm like, okay. And I find it odd because I'm pretty sure, at least for the Air Force anyway, the way we can, I'm never disrespectful. I always start my conversations and end them, sir, ma'am. None of those customs and courtesies go away. But I don't have to introduce myself as Lieutenant Colonel Avila all the time, because everybody can read my rank and you can see my last name, and just it's okay. You can call me by my call sign, and we move on from there. But in any case, we're getting to learn each other's tendencies and quirks, and this is where I want to talk about during this week's episodes, is a concept of being a stress sponge or a stress fountain. So the ops tempo at work is really, really high because we have a lot of stuff going on, and when you're at work a lot and you are under the constant pressure to deliver products and briefings and prep for this next meeting, to get ready for the next meeting, and we need to shape the narrative to say this and make sure we don't embarrass ourselves by saying that, inevitably stress is going to hit. And that's going to hit in any work environment, right? I mean, I haven't been in a work environment or even my family environment where there hasn't been some degree of stress that encounters, and we have to figure out how we're going to deal with it. And so, interesting concept was introduced to me. I don't know who exactly told me about it. Probably was one of my either one of my bosses or another coworker back in Alaska, and they introduced the idea of stress fountain and stress sponge. And so here's the definitions of the two. Stress fountain. A stress fountain is someone who is unable to intake stress and deal with it accordingly. So in other words, they intake stress because they're put in a stressful situation, and then they fountain out and they splash out additional stress out to everybody else around them. And so I think the example was, I was charged with getting some work done, whatever it was, And then there were some last minute changes. And then I want to say it might have been the wing exec or somebody that worked for one of my bosses came down and was all freaking out. Like, we need to get this slide deck ready. And I have to process these all reports. And she was just going off about all these things that need to get done. And then I was like, do you need help, or what are you asking me for? I wasn't sure how to deal with, she came down to talk to me. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do in that point. And so finally I think she just kind of got frustrated and left. And I was like, I'm not really sure if I'm supposed to be doing something right now. And someone said, yeah, just don't worry about that, sir. She's a stress fountain. And I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. Well, she doesn't know how to deal with it. She just kind of fountains out all the stress onto people without really even knowing it, right? And so that's just the way that she conducted herself. So you actually don't have to do anything. Okay. And actually, in that instance, I didn't have to do anything. She was just coming down and just kind of venting or whatever it was, trying to explain what she needed to do when the action was probably on her to do and not me. But in any case, it was just kind of an interesting concept that I was introduced to. And so it was really, so they're telling me that, yeah, so she's a stress fountain, and you can see it because she's splashing all of her stress on everybody else. And you kind of can, some other, quirks that you see about people who are stress fountains. They usually they get like their raised voice. They have some abrupt decision making, or even they'll just shut down. They don't know how to deal with the stress, and they're just like, forget it. I'm just gonna walk away and just not do anything. Which is none of those things are actually conducive to actually tackling the problem or getting any work done. And so the stress fountain, by their own actions, unfortunately ruin the positive momentum that a team needs to be making in order to tackle their challenges, causing unnecessary friction and energy expenditure. One of the also wasteful things that goes around like that is especially if a stress fountain is in a position of power. And so that may not be it could be a permanent position of power, like if you're in a leadership role, or it could be just a temporary one. Maybe you're a team lead on something, some project, whatever. But if you know they're going to be a stress fountain, now what happens is if you're working for them, you actually have to take even more time and care on your own time to make sure that you present information to them and decision points and whatever it is in a balanced manner, because if you don't present it a certain way, they're going to stress out even more. And I've been in situations with that with coworkers or working for bosses. Like, I have to make sure I sell this correctly, because if I don't, curating the problem correctly and characterizing it correctly, they're going to start freaking out and like, no, it's not time for that yet. I already have a solution. So I want you to stay with me and listen to my entire story. Don't just hear the first half of it. Right. And so when you encounter stress fountains, it's a thing that you're going to have to make some choices and decisions of how you're going to deal with them. So the opposite of a stress fountain is a stress sponge. And so this is where a person who is able to intake stressful situations, and then internalize it and turn the energy into positive action. They don't splash onto anybody else. If they're encountered with something stressful, they just they'll take their time, can maintain a degree of composure, and then make some decisions in a relatively quick manner. It may take some extra time for them to calculate and truly understand what is going on, but they don't immediately jump to conclusions. They don't allow the stress to extend past them and just start clouding their vision. If anything, they make sure that okay, so I'm going to say, I always use that technique. I'm going to say this back out loud. That way, if I understand what you're telling me and I can say it back to you, that means I truly understand what's going on. If I do that correctly, then I know I can move on to the next step of trying to come up with a solution to the challenge or the problem presented in front of us. So even in the face of the adversity, they do maintain a calm demeanor. And so you'll see that as if a stress fountain encounters a stress sponge, you imagine like the fountain's all freaking out, very talking with their hands, or kind of very animated stuff, and the sponge may just be very stoically just listening, be like, okay, and just asking questions. And sometimes those situations are very awkward, because sometimes the stress fountain wants to see a mirror back. They want to know and almost like validate that their stressful situation is actually that bad. And so if they see someone not equally freaking out, that almost makes them like, they're not eliciting a response. I need to explain to them even more why this is bad. The stress sponge may actually know that it's bad, but they're not necessarily letting it bother them. They're just trying to understand and calculate what exactly is the problem and the solution that needs to be applied, and then move out from there. And so sometimes a stress sponge can have a very cold demeanor. They may be seen to have a cold demeanor, very stoic, very, which isn't good or bad. It's just that's how their demeanor is. I mean, just like I've worked with people who have very dry humor, and some people think they're assholes. Like, no, they're not an asshole. They just have dry humor, and you won't know that until you interface with them more, and you understand that, like, oh, that's just how they talk, and that's how they conduct themselves. I'm a little bit more animated and I don't know if I consider myself funny. I go for quantity, not quality, in my jokes sometimes, but inevitably you can tell that I'll be able to listen, and I've developed my own self-awareness to where I try not to be a stress fountain as much as possible, and so because I think I owe it as I continue to grow in leadership positions, and I believe all of us that should be charged with this. You have to be able to take in stress. So in the end, you're not necessarily binary, like you are a stress fountain or you are a stress sponge. You're going to be, you vary depending on what the stress factor is or the catalyst is. You're going to vary between a fountain or a sponge, and rightfully so, right? And sometimes, like, if too many things are coming at you, you're going to start fountaining. And like, so earlier this week, I was getting frustrated again at work because I was getting presented with tasks, but it seemed like I had to fight against the technology and the tools I had to use, and it was making my tasks at hand much longer and harder to do. So I started freaking out. I think I audibly let out like a not a yell, but like a growl or something like that. And then I was like, I'm sorry, that was fountaining. Never mind. And the reason why I said that out loud is because I already introduced this concept to my team, to my intel and ops deputy, because we work right next to each other, right? And it's important for me to make sure that we know when each other is stressed out, when we need to take time to just listen and talk or take a break, whatever that means, because something is happening where somebody needs help. And so this is where the only way I could make sure everybody knew what this the concept was, I had to talk to them about it, right? And so as we saw things going on, we have morning briefings every morning, and then we deliver them, and we noticed the personalities, conducting themselves accordingly. We started to learn everybody's personalities, and then I'd say, okay, so here's what's going on. This team lead is actually a stress fountain. And they're like, what do you mean? So I explained to them between the difference between stress fountain and stress sponge. They're like, oh, okay. So I said, so when you see that happening, you need to be cool and just listen, because they're just fountaining, and that's their own personality. You can't change it, but you can control how you conduct yourself. And so we work hard to listen to exactly what is the problem at hand. Is that actually our responsibility? And then we circle back as a team and take care of what we need to do. But I introduced that concept early, so that's what you need to do. Take these stories of a stress fountain and stress sponge. Use an example. I'm very sure you have, especially a stress fountain. You have someone near you that acts like a stress fountain. Could be one of your immediate teammates, and you use it as a talking point. Like, pause, huddle, everybody take a knee. Let's talk about this. Talk about the difference between a fountain and a sponge and how we can deal with it. And you also need to tell everybody that you're never assigned to a single role. And all of us throughout our personal and professional lives go into one of these stages or another. But the key point is knowing how to recognize it, either internally or externally, and then knowing how to deal with it, right? And so the best thing for you individually is you're going to have to develop your self-awareness. A lot of that means you need to understand your own personality to know what things trigger you. And sometimes it could be, where something is going to cause you to miss time with your kids because you have to stay late or something like that. And sometimes that's required for the job. But that you dealing with that isn't the best way to do it. You start to freak out because you have to deal with childcare, and I have to get with somebody to cover down on whatever it is. That's definitely something that could cause you to fountain that way. And your teammates, if they know that and you know it internally, you can kind of say like, hey, so I'm sorry, I'm kind of freaking out right now. I just need some help because I'm really concerned about how I'm going to cover down on my kids. Once you kind of break down what your individual problem is, you'd be surprised how much a good teammates will cover down for you. Be like, oh yeah, just go, we got it. Take care of your kids. We'll take care of this here, and then we'll just circle back with you in the morning, and we'll move on forward. But you have to be able to recognize when those opportunities are happening and then explain it and using your words and finishing your sentences. Then people can help you. But if you start fountaining over freaking everywhere, nobody's going to be able to help you because they're really just trying to stay out of your splash zone, right? Very SeaWorld-y. I don't want to be in the splash zone. I don't want any of that extra stress on me. But if you're asking me for help in a, constructive manner, I will always be a good teammate and make sure I'm there for you. So, and then another piece is, in addition to develop your self-awareness, is hashtag DBA, and don't be afraid to call out someone else on your team and be like, hey, bro, you're kind of fountaining right now, man. You okay? And it's okay. If you have the right relationship with your teammate, you should be able to call them out and say, bro, I think you're kind of fountaining with your stress right now. I need you to calm down. Or what's going on? How can I help? What do you need what can I do to help with the situation? Sometimes that could just be, I need you to cover down on this task because I have to do this task. Okay, cool. And we do that at the ops floor right now. We're getting a better job of kind of delegating certain tasks, and then also just saying, we're just going to accept and risk and not do that because these other ones take priority, and that's okay. And I make those decisions for our team, and I think they trusted my leadership on that. Sometimes when you hear someone fountaining, what they really need is just somebody to listen. They just need someone to just sit there, and they need to vent out and soundboard all the things going on in their head. And all you need to do is listen. Not unlike when you're in a relationship between your husband or wife or your girlfriend, boyfriend. Not every single time when they're talking to you are they looking for you to fix the problem. They're just looking for someone to listen. You're not going to always necessarily do that because, especially, this is an overgeneralization, but guys are fixers, right? Inevitably, I believe all guys are fixers. And so when Gina explains a problem to me, I need to be sure within the situation, I'm like, is she just talking to me about the problem, or is she asking me for help? Because sometimes she's just venting, and I'll start to interrupt her, and then she's like, I wasn't asking for you to help. I'm just kind of talking to you out loud. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. So, and I still continue that over many years of our marriage, and I don't get it right all the time, but I try and get right most of the time. But those are kind of things that you need to do. Recognizing when someone else is fountaining and how you can positively respond to that. Could be just get them something to eat, right? Maybe they're hangry. Definitely Gina knows if I need to go eat a sandwich or she needs to give me one of the emergency granola bars in the car. She recognizes that because she's a good teammate, and I love her and appreciate for that because she knows how to deal with me accordingly. So in summary, stress fountain and stress sponge. No one is perfect, and we all take on the form of a fountain or a sponge at any point in time. The key is to recognizing when we are the fountain and when we see it, and then conducting ourselves accordingly, either internally with ourselves or with our teammates. I highly recommend introducing the concept with your team just through an informal discussion. Use a real example to say, this is what fountaining is, and here's how we can deal with it. And really it gives people an avenue to where the stress doesn't have to be taken on themselves. They have a free environment to where they can kind of reach out for help and just talk. And you'd be surprised how many challenges are not that big a deal, or you have some support next to you in the form of your good teammates. And so stress fountain, stress sponge, use this technique in your work centers, in your teams, in your families. Introduce a concept at your family dinner and call each other out. I probably will be calling my kids out when I start seeing those kind of things, because I really want to be able to what do you need? Do you need help? If it's math, I stopped being able to provide help on math several years ago, so I can't do that. But I'm kind of good with technology. I'm kind of good with other presentation things, and so I don't mind helping, but I need to understand if you need help or what exactly are you stressing out about. So I think that's going to conclude this episode this week. I'll talk to you guys next week. Peace. This is Gabe Brock, and thanks for tuning into the Breaking Red podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review so we can improve our work and deliver the best content possible. You can find our community platforms on Facebook and YouTube by searching for Breaking Red Podcast. Keep up with weekly content at our website, projectrise.co, and you can find me on Instagram at GabeRock01. Like, follow, and share Breaking Red Podcast content everywhere possible, both the good and the bad. Join our conversations with other rising military leaders that aren't afraid to break red and learn how to rise to your potential.